Hey everyone, Off the Mic Sports Network here. I want to talk CFP here for a second. So the CFP rankings came out on Tuesday night, and really, a lot of what this season has come down to is, how are the Big Ten and SEC going to do when it comes to the final 12 teams that make it in? Because somebody is going to get screwed. Even though they expanded this thing, somebody is going to get screwed. And for the life of me, I said it on this channel a week or so ago, I have no fundamental understanding of what the hatred for Indiana is. I don't understand it. Like, I get why ESPN is trying to, frame a lot of cases for SEC teams because they have the rights to the SEC media package, which is fine. Okay, it's fine. But what are we supposed to do when everybody wanted this realignment stuff? You've got these mega conferences with these unbalanced schedules with 18 teams in a conference, and Indiana, because of it, has not won a top 25 game this year. Their one game against a top 25 team happens on Saturday in Columbus at the Horseshoe against Ohio State. They're the number 5 team in the country. They're 10-0. They play Purdue at the end of the season. For anybody who cares about anything Big Ten football, Purdue is awful. They're one of the worst Power 5 programs in America. Not Power 5. I've got to get used to that. Power 4 programs in America. They've won one game this entire season. Indiana is beating Purdue. They're going to finish 11-1. At minimum, they're going to finish 11-1. Now, a couple things that I want to touch on here in this video, but really all this comes back to Indiana. And this game against Ohio State is going to define, this game is going to lead to what is the main legacy of this first 12-team iteration of the college football playoff. Because if Indiana gets blown out by Ohio State, there's going to be a strong case to leave the Hoosiers out of the playoff, which I don't understand because we're talking about, everybody wants to try and make this about resume. Indiana would have lost one game the entire season, and they would have beaten virtually almost every team except for Michigan by double digits, and handily, by the way. Why do we need to penalize teams, let alone a Power 4 team in one of the most powerful leagues in college football? Why do we need to penalize them for, going undefeated or losing one game on their schedule? This isn't like, a random school in the SWAC or something like that. It's not like a group of 5 schedule. Yeah, the Big Ten, outside of the top 4 teams, is not very good this year. Illinois slipped in the back door of the top 25 in the CFP rankings. But I think what Kirk Cignetti has done at that school is nothing short of remarkable. I think Indiana has long been thought of as a basketball school. They've become a football school. It's a great story. And if they lose by 2 or 3 touchdowns at Ohio State, yes, there's probably going to be more of a compelling argument to keep them out of the playoff. I still think they deserve to be in as a one-loss, Power 4 team in what has been a down, in a top-heavy Big Ten. But it's man, I just don't get why we need to penalize and rush to judge people when, teams like Texas have. Texas's one loss is at home to Georgia. Best wins against Vanderbilt? Michigan? Yeah, they blew out Michigan in Ann Arbor the second week of the season. Congratulations. Indiana barely beat them at home, but still, Texas, one loss, 2 spots ahead of Indiana with, beating some really just mediocre teams in the SEC. Notre Dame, they're 9-1, right in the same state as they're 9-1. Lost to Northern Illinois. And Notre Dame could potentially be 11-1, not play in a conference championship game. If they beat Army this week and they beat USC at the end, there's a really strong chance that actually, listen, if Notre Dame wins their last 2 games, they're getting in. They're getting in. It's happening. They're at 6 right now. But Indiana, if they lose to Ohio State's out of the playoff. Alabama, 8-2. Lost to Vanderbilt, lost to Tennessee. Alabama may not even make the SEC title game, but they seem to be firmly in the playoff. Miami, 9-1. They lost to Georgia Tech. Georgia Tech, who is a 500 level team. Georgia Tech's playing a lot better, but losing to Georgia Tech, that's a bad loss. Why Miami's in the top 10, I don't get it. Ole Miss lost to LSU. LSU's a bad team. LSU is not great. They're middle of the road in the SEC. They did beat Georgia, which is great. And then they lost to Kentucky. And Kentucky's another middle of the road team. So Ole Miss's losses are not great. Georgia lost. Georgia, loses to Alabama. They were down by like 4 touchdowns in that game, managed to come back and win the game. And then they lose to Ole Miss. Tennessee lost to Georgia, lost to Arkansas. You got Boise State. Boise State, honest to God, like Boise State, there's a good chance that they could get a bye, which actually might be detrimental to them. They're 9-1. Their only losses to Oregon, the number 1 team in the country who hasn't lost this year. And, hey, they got maybe one of the best players in the country who's probably not going to win the Heisman Trophy because Travis Hunter's got so much track. And then SMU lost to BYU. Like, I could keep rolling down these teams, but what difference is and Penn State lost at home to Ohio State. Like, I could keep running down a bunch of these resumes here and tell you what is different from Indiana's resume than to any of those teams that I mentioned. Georgia's played a really tough schedule. I understand that, and they lost 2 games, okay? But Notre Dame, yes, they beat Texas A&M, which is a great win, but they also lost to Northern Illinois. Like, this is a crapshoot year. Miami has really, Miami, unless they win the ACC, has no business being in the playoff. Like, they don't. It's just, you look at some of these records, it's like, I don't understand the just urgency to just, brush Indiana aside because of, the IU. And we're not accustomed to seeing them be in this type of discussion. They have won every single one of their games. Yeah, it hasn't been a great schedule, but hey, something funny? You know what Michigan's schedule looked like last year? Not great until they played Ohio State at the end of the year. Not great at all. So just keep that in mind. I think Indiana should be in. Just don't go get boat raced by Ohio State. And and to be honest with you, Ohio State had a significant injury on their offensive line. I think this is going to be a competitive game. And I think there's actually a decent chance that Ohio State loses. And then the conversation becomes, what do you do with Ohio State as potentially, because I think they'll beat Michigan. What do you do with the 10-2 Ohio State team that has no hope of going to the Big Ten championship game? That becomes a very interesting argument there that nobody's talking about. Everybody's focused on Indiana because everybody's assuming Indiana is going to lose. Indiana just doesn't need to get blown out, in my opinion, and I think they should be fine. This whole discussion with Joey Galloway of saying they should sit their starting quarterback Curtis Rourke to protect themselves from being Florida Stated and having their quarterback be injured and having an undefeated team kicked out of the playoff. Listen, if they sit Curtis Rourke, they're not beating Ohio State. so that argument was stupid. But listen, it's just like everybody's just these shows and stuff and like all this discussion. It's just making everybody crazy. But as a guy who's seen this Indiana team play, and I saw them in person against UCLA at the start of the season, not really knowing much about them, this is a real team. In my opinion, they're one of the 12 best teams in college football. They've blown teams out. Stop looking at who they played. Yes, this is their most important game in program history. 2 versus 5, big noon window. Like, it's the legacy game. It's all that anybody's going to talk about this week. But we need to stop trying to push Indiana out of the playoff. Because I thought the whole idea of expanding this thing was about inclusion. So that's my thought here on the CFP. We'll have more coming up over the course of the week. Anyway, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye-bye.